you can tell on that same map by scrolling down exactly where you're getting love from, represented by both people count and AGI, adjusted gross income, and where you're losing people to. So at a very minimum, it can be very useful just to prove how people and their wealth are moving around, even within your region, even if that's from one county to the next. It allows you to see that in greater detail.
So obviously candidates
Absolutely, very useful.
can point blank dispute Jerry Brown. I know in Maryland they went right across the border because it was easy, you didn't have very far to commute. But in California, you could have a Republican Assembly candidate have right in the palm of his hand dispute the Democrats' notion that people are leaving his or her district.
That's right. We think this can, with a free app, you can turn an ordinary taxpayer or citizen at a town hall forum of any kind and turn that person into an extraordinary taxpayer advocate. And we know you can do it, right? Despite all the dismal news, California has led the country before. Part of us that have worked on tax reform issues in the other states always turn to the model, right? What's the model of taxpayer withholding? Prop 13, how do I know it? I've never been in California, but I know Prop 13. I know of the many years of battle. I know of the 12-year fight. Anyone in the crusade for economic growth in the form of tax policy arguments knows and turns to your leadership and time that your state rose up and said, enough is enough, we need some relief, and we're going to make a change.
Question?
Yes, sir.
I've heard that California has the highest percentage of welfare recipients in the United States. Do you have any insights into where they came from?
We don't track welfare recipients or Medicaid transfers or anything like that, so I couldn't speculate on it. But what you do see in the data by looking at adjusted gross income on a per-person basis is some idea what type of taxpayer you're recruiting or what class they may enter, and whether or not they're staying for one of those kind of social service related reasons. Let me give you an example. Closer to where I live, you have Hurricane Katrina that devastated the state of Louisiana. And so it won't surprise you that Louisiana lost a whole of $6 billion. A lot of that was permanent loss when residents moved to Houston, Memphis, Little Rock, etc. But what you do see if you do a deeper dive into county by county analysis, many folks from Arkansas believe that they benefited from Louisiana residents moving in. And in the south part of the state, they say, well, yeah, that's a good thing. We got growth, right? We had people added. I had this in front of 400 Rotarians. Well, if you're looking at, the other things that that are impacted in the state budget, such as social service benefits, you'll find that the system is a little bit more attractive in Arkansas, staying in Arkansas, than it once was for those people that were in Louisiana. So don't be surprised that you do see more of a load from those residents staying in that state, and that has a potential carrying cost that's greater. And to a certain extent, you can see that clustered in the distribution of incomes and transfer of people over time.
So how much did you say California's lost?
Nearly $32 billion.
And then what does that mean? Every year that's a loss?
Cumulative amount of $32 billion over the time period from 1995 to 2010. The migration that we cover of all 50 states covers about $2 trillion, which is equivalent to the California GDP, roughly.
Okay, and so I think you were slightly technical on what you were talking about with the FTB.
Yes.
They are literally, because they didn't vote,
Correct.
putting a retroactive tax,
Correct.
potentially all the way back to 2008.
That's right. In fact, all the way back, based on statute of limitations. Yeah, this is really remarkable. So, from a matter of tax policy, this is doing everything from start to finish the wrong way. What everyone would say by a matter of tax policy is that you need to send a clear signal, even if you're going to pay the rates, you need to know that sort of there's a permanent condition, and you need to be refereed and treated fairly, right? No matter, even if it's bad news, when paying more than you might pay somewhere else. So what the recent actions of your franchise tax board have done is, sent a shockwave of anxiety for people. You have folks that have sold their business in 2009, done very well, reinvested in another business, so that's no longer liquid. And they, as far as they knew at the time, for the last 5 years, have been paying their share of whatever they were rightly, owing to the state, who are now getting tax bills for things that they can't change over 6 figures, sometimes larger. This is not it. Okay, we got a few people saying, yeah, I know.
I sympathize.
Yeah. So the issue is not that they did their taxes wrong. They completed everything over the past 5 years to the best of their knowledge. And it would be actually worse if it wasn't for a 5-year statute of limitations deemed by your courts, that's as far back as they could nullify the entire act. Now, my understanding from the experts here that have studied in my review is that the franchise board could have just taken out the portion of the law that was in dispute with another taxpayer. Or they could have said, well, here's how we're going to choose to enforce this differently now in light of this new ruling. So their failure to act has now caused a retroactive tax to be applied to no fault of the taxpayers who happen to have made an important sale in their business, maybe reinvested all that they had in their children's education, and they don't have that kind of money. Besides the fact that it's an incredible burden and it's an extremely unfair way to run a railroad, it's extremely damaging to any Silicon Valley entrepreneur. Yes?
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but in fact, it can bankrupt.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, because you can do all the tax planning in the world.
Yeah.
And you can gift and you can do everything, and then boom, hit you retroactively, and all of a sudden you've got this big bill, and you haven't budgeted for it. You haven't put it in your 5-year plan.
Absolutely.
You have to come up with that money magically.
Yeah, and to make issues worse, if you're one that believes that Prop 30 was a good thing and that you could keep doing it if you needed to again and raise marginal tax rates further, well, now the people that you're depending on, the next big one, are gone. And let me give you some, in doing a book like this, the reality of a Silicon Valley entrepreneur today who may not be in Santa Clara County. Okay, so you got people like the CEO of Zappos, investing $350 million of his own cash after tax to build the parts that he feels are missing in the Las Vegas community, from Teach for America teachers and new schools to better coworker environments for shared office space. So there is a real serious competition for the future of our cities. And California cities used to be that place that you turn to. With these kinds of policies, they could not be more damning to entrepreneurs and how they think long term. They don't need that kind of risk. They certainly don't need that immediate tax burden. And it's certainly unfair as to how it's regulated. And unfortunately, I'm told one of the only remedies is getting legislative help now from the city.
By the way, Travis, please don't bring up how to run a railroad in this state. Did I see another hand out there? Go ahead, Eric.
Couple back here.
I just wanted to know, since you said that some of the top liberals reject your theory of moving around, have you thought of challenging them to perhaps a tax system that's ideologically based on belief? Because I would be happy to raise taxes on liberals if it would get them to leave.
I think what I find really difficult to understand from opponents that deny, they'll just come out and outright deny and say, well, there's no correlation with economic growth from lowering tax rates. I think that's really irresponsible. And if you push them further and try to produce studies or counterexamples, what then they'll try to do is minimize the percentage of total people that are actually involved in taxpayer mobility. As you can see with these results that we've presented, I think these numbers are substantial. They may not be the majority of people, but keep in mind, we're just tracking the hard metrics of people that actually move. For every person that has gone to Austin and can speak to this, you're not tracking all the other behavioral changes that you'll never see. in other groups and other corporations making decisions about the workflow of capital and investment. So many of those, the numbers I think are actually much larger. But let's go back. If you lost four stadium fills of Candlestick Park, would that be a big deal? I mean, I think that's a big deal, even though you live in a state that's a very large state with a very large economy. I still think every taxpayer is entitled to a better way to keep more of their production and an opinion that this matters to them, it matters to their family.
Someone else? Try and speak loud so we can get across the line.
When you analyze the situation, how do you factor in, say, someone leaving California and moving to Texas, or moving to Missouri, in the same profession, seeing a significant drop in their personal income?
By moving to one state from California to Texas?
Yeah.
So we don't do any local market adjustments or any kind of census adjustments but you can look at, the price of the salary or a wage of a particular thing can be evaluated in several ways. Number one, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS, has a lot of those regional averages. And so if I am, in my example of the two cousins that both want to be community pharmacists, and if there is a substantial difference between the same career in terms of occupational wage, I can review that and study that if I want to. What we are tracking, however, is just the data that exists on your adjusted gross income. So if it turns out that you actually make less by a move to Texas, you made a choice or maybe found a lesser job there, you're going to report less taxable income once you flow down through your tax returns. That will just be represented as a decline on a net basis between state A to state B. We're just tracking the data to make past performance clear and available for the previous 15 years. And then it's up to you to make the judgment calls as to what that may mean to your county or your career or your industry.